One thing I'm really interested in is understanding how every complication works eventually. So the first thing when you're learning watchmaking is to learn the basic, the most basic thing, which is the train of wheels. And I just want to quickly look at that in this pocket watch example. So basically, underneath this, you have the barrel and the mainspring. And then you have three important gears, the second, third, and fourth wheel. And then you have the escape wheel and you have the balance wheel. And almost all watch movements have this, unless they're quartz or stepper motor controlled, electronic. But almost all mechanical watch movements have this arrangement of gears in terms of basically what it's doing is it's taking a very slow release of energy from the barrel and regulating it with the balance wheel, which acts like essentially a pendulum that takes a certain amount of time to swing back and forth because of the hairspring. And it regulates the power flow out of the barrel. And then these three wheels, second, third, and fourth wheel, each have small gears called pinions on the center of them underneath these jewels. And those small gears are always mated with the big gear on the next one. And basically it's dividing 28,800 beats per minute, whatever the pulse rate of the movement is. It's dividing that down to a slower speed to drive something as slow as an hour hand. But basically you got the mainspring and then the regulation of energy flow out of the mainspring. And that's what it looks like. The balance wheel is going the fastest, and then the escape wheel, and then the fourth wheel, and then the third wheel, and then the second wheel, and then the first wheel is the barrel itself. And then on this watch, you have a keyless works here. So you have the keyless works turning the ratchet wheel. When that's engaged, it does that, and then when you pull it out, or actually on this watch, you push a button to change it to time setting. A button right here. So that's the basic thing that's in a movement. And for comparison, I want to get into the quarter repeaters in a second, but this watch I'm also fascinated by. This is a Universal Geneva white shadow movement. It's a Universal Geneva Cal 1-67 from the 1960s, and this has a micro rotor. It's automatic, so it has kind of multiple different things going on in here in terms of space utilization. So here you have the micro rotor, which is turning according to gravity as you move the watch around, and it turns this train of wheels to introduce power into the barrel and the mainspring, and then the barrel and the mainspring are releasing energy into the train of wheels, which is right here. So this watch, which you can see is much smaller than a pocket watch, it has a lot of miniaturization in it compared to the original pocket watches, in terms of the whole train of wheels I just explained, it all sitting right under here. And that's to allow space for the keyless works here, the barrel here, the train of wheels that's doing the gearing on the automatic movement here. And that also, the fact that it has a micro rotor allows it to be quite thin. You can't really see how thin it is here, but it's a very thin movement for an automatic movement. Usually the automatic winding works are on the back of the movement and add to the thickness of it. So when you look at any watch, no matter how complicated it looks at first glance or any movement, at least when it's open and you can see what the movement is doing, you should look for, first of all, the train of wheels, the main train of wheels for timekeeping, and then look at the other things and try to figure out what they're doing in addition to adding other complications to the movement. So the quarter repeater, I have two quarter repeaters. One is this continental quarter repeater from the early to mid 1800s. And so the first thing we would do here is also look at all this stuff on this side is actually for the quarter repeater. So what a quarter repeater does, if you don't know, is it plays the hours in a chime, and then it plays the quarter hours in a double chiming event, the first chime plus the second chime. So it sounds a little bit different. So 1:15 would be one chime for one, and then one double chime for 15 minutes after. 1:30 would be one chime for one, and then two double chimes for 30 minutes after. 1:45 would be one chime, and then three double chimes for 45 minutes after. And the way they work is that they don't chime constantly. It's kind of similar to church bells, actually, in Switzerland at least, the way that the coding is, I just explained. But it doesn't do it every hour in your pocket. It does it, or every 15 minutes. It only does it when you activate it. So you could be blind and you could listen to it, or you could, in the dark, you could play it and listen to it to know what time it is. And I'm guessing that it was also kind of a reference to church bells, and that's why it became popular. And it also was probably in house clocks. I know it was in house clocks and mantle clocks prior to pocket watches and wristwatches even existing. But the point is, the quarter repeater is a complication. It has historical basis, but then there's a mechanical way of implementing it. And in this watch, I'll explain the mechanical way of implementing it in a second. But the first thing I just wanted to point out is that it's all on the front of this movement, just under the dial. And it's kind of, I'm going to open the back next and just show you where the basic train of wheels is, so that you can look at the front kind of separately as like, okay, this is all about the quarter repeater. And then the back is mostly about the timekeeping. But one thing, like, I just started studying this complication not that long ago. What did I do there? And when I first got this watch, I would just look at it and just be like, I don't understand it. Which, if you're watching this video for the first time and you don't know this complication, it's the same feeling that you have right now just having looked at that. Like, I don't know what that is. But I can explain every single thing about what you just saw, I think, in a way that makes you understand it. So on this side, we have the timekeeping. So here you have the barrel, which has the first wheel under it. And then here you have the second wheel, third wheel, fourth wheel, and escape wheel, and then the balance wheel. So this part of the watch is the same as this watch. And then over here we have a second barrel with a mainspring. And inside the barrel there's always a mainspring like this one. That's where the big store of energy is. So that's a thick spring that winds and then unwinds usually over the course of a day or two or more. It will unwind slowly and run the train of wheels and the timekeeping function. So in this watch, the main mainspring is here, and then there's a secondary smaller mainspring that's just for the powering the quarter repeater function. So that mainspring has its own little train of wheels, which are not at all unlike these in terms of pinion and wheel, pinion and wheel, pinion and wheel, to gear the slow speed of the barrel unwinding to a high speed wheel on the end, which is used to regulate the unwinding, so that the chimes play at a slow enough rate that you can hear and count them instead of just all going off at once. You can see the pinions for these wheels here, or the pivots, and the pinions are under the wheels. And then instead of having a balance wheel, we have some kind of a regulator. And that regulator slows this. You can speed up or slow down the playback of the chimes. Okay, so I'm going to put some power into this just so you can see the timekeeping part of it get going. And I want to point out that the center wheel is connected to the minute hand on the front of the watch, because we'll see this again when I flip it over. So the timekeeping function, the only thing pushing through to the front of the watch is the minute wheel in the center. And that's significant because on the other side where the quarter repeater function is, that minute wheel and the pinion, the arbor that turns the minute wheel, the minute hand, is going to turn some other gears, and it's going to turn some things that are used to detect what time it is by the repeater function, which is also on the other side. But on this side, all you need to know is that this is the timekeeping area, and this is the power for the chimes. And then these are the two chimes themselves. Well, the chimes are these pieces of metal, so they resonate harmonically when they're hit by these little hammers. So when it wants to play a sound, it'll pull back these hammers. And they have different pitches so you can hear the difference. And I think that's it. And now we'll go back to the repeater side. So to power this, you push this in, and that, I should have done that before I flipped it over, but basically that's putting a wind on that smaller mainspring on the other side. And it's setting up the chiming. So I'll go into the details of that in a second, but before that, like I said, the center of the center arbor on the watch is this arbor in the center of the watch, and it's coming up, and it has a pinion on it down here that turns the hour wheel, and this is the wheel that turns the minute. Oh, sorry, it turns the minute wheel, and that turns the hour wheel here, and it does that by having a gear ratio of 12:1 between the minute hand and the hour hand. So this is separate from the repeater work, and that's just why I wanted to kind of remove these wheels and pinions and then keep talking so that you're not feeling like you don't know what these are about. So once we get onto on this level, and sorry, yeah, I mentioned these drive the hands directly. So this watch doesn't have a seconds hand at all. Just has an hour and minute hand, and they're completely on top of that area that we just discussed. And then underneath it, you have this thing called a snail, which is on the minute hand arbor, and it's the quarter snail, and it has 4 different depths. That's why it's called a snail, probably because it looks like a snail or a snail shell, but basically it has 4 different depths. It's not a gear, it doesn't push anything, but what happens is when you activate the repeater function, these teeth come in and measure which position that snail is in, and from that measurement, that determines if the repeater rings, in this case for the quarter hours, 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, or no times. So the feeler that does the quarter hour chimes is right here. And then this other feeler comes in at the same time when you charge it, and it measures the hour snail, which is underneath this star wheel, and is similar in that it has 12 different depths to the cuts in it. And then the star wheel, its function is just to make the hour change and settle in the middle. And so it has a spring. It has a spring and this kind of presser that each time the hour advances at when the minute hand goes to the 12 o'clock position, it advances the hour, and then the hour wheel advances and snaps into the next position because this presser rolls over the tip of the star and into the next one. So it makes sure that the snail underneath it is positioned throughout the hour for that particular hour. So if you press it at any time during that hour, it's correctly aligned to give you the one chime or 2 chimes or 3 chimes up to 12 chimes. And that's it. So there's those 2 snails. And then the other thing is on the bottom of this, I'm not sure if this even comes off on this movement. It doesn't want to come off easily. It's probably pressed on. But basically underneath there's some gear teeth that turn that star wheel every hour. Or it's not a gear tooth. It's a kind of a single cog that is turning around on the bottom of that. And then there's another thing, which is there's this little piece at 12 o'clock, which I forget, it has a special word for it, but basically it comes out and it makes sure that at 12 o'clock you get a very precise change from 1 hour to the next, because again, this is the quarter hour snail. And this part I'm not exactly familiar with enough to tell you how it works right now, but it gets pushed out and then it basically makes sure that it snaps open at exactly 12, kind of like a date changeover, so that the snail that's measuring it doesn't get caught up on the corner between hour changes. And the reason that it needs that at 12 o'clock is that the difference between 1:15 and 1:30, where it would be 1 chime of the quarter chime or 2 chimes, it doesn't really matter how accurate it is, because you could be off by a minute and it would just be a minute, and the whole thing is only telling you in 15-minute intervals. But at 12 o'clock, if it's off by an hour, you could get like confused between if it's 12:45 or 1:45 or 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock. So it would be, that's why it has to change over instantly. If you were still getting the 45-minute chimes with the new hour, you would be off by an hour. Your clock would be misinforming of the time by an hour. So that's why that snail has that thing on it. Now, I thought this would be easy to explain. It's more complicated than I thought, but it's still, we're getting there. So the next thing is when you charge this up. And by the way, the thing on the back side that regulates the speed of the power flow out of the mainspring for the repeater function is called a governor, as opposed to a balance wheel. It's a governor that's not as accurate. The balance wheel is important to be very accurate and have a hairspring oscillating at a very precise speed because it's keeping time. The governor can be a little bit looser of a friction device because it's just kind of arbitrarily slowing down the energy flowing through the chimes. In any case, on this watch, the governor has the last wheel before the governor has a broken pivot, which I'll have to repair eventually. And because of that, the governor releases the energy very quickly, like that. So in order to demonstrate this for you, I have to let the energy out slowly, which I can do, and I will do in a second. But the salient point about that is that's why this is happening fast, and I'll do it really slow right now so you can watch what happens. And I'll just do it without talking for the first time. Oh, so that's 5 o'clock. So that's because the minute wheel is in this position of the new hour. And the way we can confirm that that's the new hour is because it has this secret part that comes out. So in order to change that to something more interesting, so we actually get a double chime, we'll change it to, that's 15 after, that's 30. And that should be 3 chimes, 45 minutes. Should still be 5 o'clock because I didn't change this. So we charge it, let it out slowly. Okay, so you heard the 3 chimes at the end to mean 45 minutes. So I'm going to do this again, and this time I want you to notice that when this charges up, first of all, that barrel that has the other additional mainspring, it's under here. It's wrapped around this arbor, and it's underneath there. And that's what's powering this. So when you push the plunger in, it's pulling this chain and introducing power to that spring. And then when you release it, the power in the spring is unwinding, and that's why the bells chime. And depending on how far this snail is able to measure, that determines how many of these gear teeth, of which there are 12, are passing by the chime clicker before you release it. So if it's 6 o'clock, when you press this in, it'll pass 6 teeth, and then when you release it, 6 teeth will pass again, and that will determine you get your 6 bell rings. And that's this chime, which is under here, is the chime that is telling you the hours. And then there's a second chime, which is under here, which tells you the minutes, and it's activated for either 1, 2, or 3 chimes, depending on if it's 15 after, 30 after, or 45 after. And you can see there's 3 teeth here and 3 teeth here because both bells or chimes ring for the quarter hour. And the charging of those, how many of these, pass the clicker is determined by the other feeler and the other snail. So again, this snail is measuring the hours, and this snail is measuring the quarter hours. So if we watch that again, you can see both snails are now measuring. So we're here for the hours, and we're here for the quarter hours. I'm not sure if that's 5 or 6 now. We can listen to the chimes again. It sounded like 6 last time. But this is definitely 3/4 of an hour. And then if you look here, you can see that the 3/4 hour teeth have all passed. So they're all 3 of these are going to pass by this bell ringing tooth. So that's how you get your 3 rings on that bell. And then same thing here. You've got 3 rings here. And then up here we have somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 or 6. And that's how far it's gone because of this feeler. So now I'm going to let it out slowly again, and you can pick any of those spots to watch, and you can see what happens. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so the other things that you can see here is that we now know, you understand what the feelers are doing, how the feelers translate what they've detected into a certain number of gear teeth for ringing the chimes. You can see where the chimes are. You can see that the chimes have springs that prepare them to go back into position for second chime. This spring is the hammer spring, so it's actually not, knocking the hammer against the chime. This is an adjustment to back, how you can loosen this screw and then back exactly how hard the chime hits it and when the chime stops. And you have a similar thing here for this chime. And so each chime has 2 springs, one to activate it, one to fight that and pull it back. And I think that's it. And then the train of wheels for the governor are on the back of this little T-shaped thing, and you can see the pinion, the pivots for that train of wheels here in these little countersunk recesses. So there's one other thing. It doesn't want to give you a false result. It's designed not to give you a false result if you fail to push the button all the way in. So to do that, there's a hook on this spring, and it won't it won't, the whole system won't work. I'm not exactly sure how it does this, but it doesn't work until you push it all the way in and it releases this. And then it releases all the teeth into place to start the chiming. And you can see, because I've already done it, when it settles at the end of the event, this piece will get hooked behind this tooth here, preparing it for the next event. See, that tooth is getting hooked right here. And when I let it out one bit more, it hooks it. So again, when that happens, now I can partly push it and I don't get like an incorrect number of rings. I have to push it all the way, and at the end it releases, and then it's ready to play. And I'm just trying to see how that release happens. Okay, I see it. So this whole star wheel and snail are on this, they're mounted, instead of being mounted on the main plate, they're mounted on this rack. So that when this feeler comes in and feels this snail underneath the star wheel, it also pushes this, the whole thing it's mounted on, back by 1 millimeter, releasing this tooth. I think that's it. I'm just looking at, this spring is for that, makes it snap to the hour. I don't remember what this spring does. What's under there? I think that's just the click spring on the barrel. Yeah. So that's how a quarter repeater works. Took me a lot longer to explain that than I thought it would. But I think this is interesting because I want to remember, I want to know this stuff kind of intuitively. And you know, it takes an effort. Governor is here. You can see there's a little thing like, you could turn this, it works with the same size key as winding. This is how you would regulate if you wanted the playback to be a little bit faster or a little bit slower. You can turn this, and it has an indicator, like a fast, slow indicator, just like the balance wheel has a regulator. But like I said, it's not working because there's a pivot broken right there. So there's one other thing. There's a click on this, which it allows you to add energy, a base amount of energy to the spring that drives the repeater mechanism. And you can see it doesn't, when I charge this, you can see the spring itself getting some charge, but nothing changes with this click, because this click is just holding in this pre-charge. One thing that I don't know about yet is what the point of this Maltese cross is. It seems to me that it stops you from winding it at a certain point. When there's a little pin tooth on this that gets caught up in the Maltese cross, and I know that should be something that is easy to learn, but I just haven't learned that yet. Somebody can explain it in the comments, but I can also just Google it, or you can Google it. It's something that was like eventually just mainsprings didn't need that anymore. But I noticed, what did I do with that? Arafat gave me a second movement which is more of a standard pocket watch movement, but it also has that Maltese cross there. This is a modern, just a regular timekeeping movement. Okay, so I'm just going to restore the minute and hour wheels to this. Yikes. Why am I struggling with that? I think I was doing something stupid. I think I was aligning 1 at 12 instead of 12. All right, if I decide to publish this, thanks for watching.